Okay, English consonant sounds. I have a question. What is the definition of a consonant sound? Do you know? Like, do you know how to define a consonant sound? What makes a consonant sound different from a vowel sound? Yes, perfect. The consonant sounds are sounds that are produced with a relative or like a partial or a complete obstruction of the air in the vocal tract. Okay, listen to this. This is very important. There is or there should be an obstruction of the air at some point. Okay, when the air is coming out, there must be an obstruction in order for it to be a consonant sound. Okay, the obstruction can be partial, can be simply a modification in the vocal tract, but there must be an obstruction. What makes it different from a vowel sound is that for the vowel sounds, there's no air obstruction. The sound changes just the same way your jaw closes or opens, and with the position of the tongue, but not by making any obstruction. The air, in fact, goes out freely, like right? It goes out freely from your lungs all the way to the mouth. So there is no obstruction in the consonant sounds. English consonant sounds, or well, in fact, every consonant sound in the world is produced with an obstruction of the airstream, as you can see here, right? So the definition of consonant sound, there must be an obstruction. Where? It doesn't matter as long as it is from the vocal cords all the way to the lips, okay? Whatever you make the obstruction, it does not matter. Obviously, in the different parts where you make the obstruction, we will make different sounds. If you make the obstruction here with the velum and the back of the tongue, then we're gonna make velar sounds like g, right? Like G or K. If you make the obstruction here with the tip of the tongue with the alveolar ridge, then you are gonna be making alveolar sounds like t, d, right? Same happens with the sounds that are produced by making an obstruction with the two lips, like upper and lower lips. Then you're making bilabial sounds like pa and ba, right? Or sorry. So that is the definition of consonant sounds. Remember, there must be an obstruction always. Okay, classification of consonant sounds. The consonant sounds are classified, we saw that in the previous chart, are classified into three main different categories or three main different things, right? So based on the voicing, which is the state of the vocal cords, if the vocal cords vibrate or don't vibrate, then you know you're making different sounds. There are some sounds that the only difference between them is simply the state of the vocal cords. For example, the s and z, okay, they are made or pronounced exactly the same, except for this little feature, which is the voicing, right? So s is the s, z is a z, right? Okay, so that is the first thing, that the first classification. The second classification is place of articulation. Remember that the consonant sound is made by obstructing the air at some point, right? In some places where, well, exactly that place where you're making the obstruction is a place of articulation. As I said before, if you are obstructing the air with the velum, then you're making a velar sound. If you're obstructing the air with the lips, then you're making a labial or bilabial. It could be labiodental, depending on how you're making the obstruction. and this is part of the classification of the consonant sounds. Okay, if you're obstructing, like partially obstructing the air in the glottis, then you're making a glottal sound like the jota, right? Like as in house. Okay, and manner of articulation is how you're making that obstruction. If the obstruction is complete, if the obstruction is partial, if the obstruction is, let's say, produces any friction, or it doesn't produce any friction, that's how the air is blocked. That is basically the manner of articulation. If for example, right, the obstruction is made, let's say if the voicing is, or the state of the vocal cords is none, like is no vibration, right? No vibration, and the air is obstructed in the hard palate. Okay, then you are making a voiceless palate sound. But then if the manner of articulation is producing some friction, then you're pronouncing a voiceless palatal fricative sound, which is in this case sh. Okay, so this is how we classify the consonant sounds. Okay, voicing, we already talked about that. It's just the state of the vocal cords. If they vibrate, then it is voiced. If it does, if the vocal cords don't vibrate, then we're talking about a voiceless sound. There are different ways you can teach your students to feel if the vocal cords are vibrating. Okay, one is by putting your, I don't know if you can see me, but let me see. Okay, one is by putting your hand on top of your neck, okay, while you're pronouncing a sound. If you feel some vibration in the palm of your hand, then it means it's a voiced sound. The other way is by tapping off your ears while pronouncing some sounds. Okay, so if you tap off your ears and then you say, for example, you don't feel any vibration in your head, but if you pronounce z, right, when you pronounce z and you're tapping your ears, then you will feel the vibration right inside your head. So that is another way the students can feel the vibration of the vocal cords. Okay, so there are some. These are just some ideas. Okay. Okay, the places of articulation. Okay, so we have labial sounds. As I said before, they are divided into bilabials or labial dentals. Bilabial sounds are the sounds that are produced by blocking the air with both the upper and the lower lips. Okay? Bilabial sounds. So we say, for example, as in ma, right? I say pa also, right? So we make a complete obstruction of the air with both the upper and the lower lips. And then when we release the air, then it comes out with a certain sound. If it is for example, a P, for example, it comes out with a puff of air, because remember that the P is voiceless, so it does not come out with the sound. It comes out just with an explosion of air, right? And then the B sound in turns, right, it will come out with some vibration also. Labiodental, if the upper teeth and the lower lip are involved. Okay, just talking about these sounds specifically, labiodentals, I think this, for some reason, even though one of these sounds exists in Spanish, which is the F, right? The V does not exist in Spanish. Okay, maybe you might probably think, oh, but the V exists as in vaca, right? Yes. In spelling, the V exists in Spanish. However, the V does not exist in pronunciation. We don't say vaca, okay? We don't say ver. We simply use the B as in burro, right? So you say vaca, burro. We don't make any difference between these two these two B sounds. So the V sound does not exist in Spanish. What does that mean? That means that when you teach phonetics, this is one of the sounds that you need to put more emphasis on, because you will be having at the end students saying very happy using the bilabial V as instead of the labial dental V as in very happy, right? So this is one of the most common mistakes that Spanish speakers in general make when learning English, okay? So please make a distinction between bilabial sounds and labiodental sounds. In this case, the B and the V, make a distinction there, okay? Interdentals. The tip of the tongue goes or stick between the upper and the lower teeth. So it's just like the zeta española, right? The Spanish zeta. Say like zapato, it says the same, right? Tha. I say think, right? Then also the. Be careful with this sound as well, okay? Don't pronounce like in they are, for example, they, okay? Then don't pronounce it as a D, as in they, for example, right? Don't use the regular D instead of the interdental one. How to do it? Pronounce it in front of a mirror, okay? So get some interdental, or let's say words that have these interdental sounds and then pronounce them in front of a mirror. You need to be able to see the tip of the tongue, okay, between the teeth every single time you pronounce those words, okay? Well, Villars, we don't have any problems with this one. The TD, Z also, even the L is also considered by alveolar sound. Palatals, careful with these palatal sounds also. None of them, like the voice or the voiceless, none of them exist in Spanish. Okay, we don't have in Spanish the sound sh, and we don't have in Spanish the sound sh. The same as the glide, the palatal glides, we don't have the sound y, and we don't have the sound w. That's why you will have students pronounce the modal auxiliary would, they pronounce it good. I would like to instead of I would like to, because we don't have the W in Spanish. Same as the Y, okay? We usually say playa, and that's why we say you, okay? You are my friend instead of you are my friend. So you gotta be careful. Those mistakes are because not because you are not explaining phonetics quite well, but just because they don't have those sounds in the mother tongue, so they are unable to see the difference in the sounds. So the problem is not production, is perception. Okay, if you are not able to perceive the difference between two or three sounds, then you are not going to be able to make it. Okay, same as in shut. As I said before, what is the difference between share and chair? Okay, which one is the object to sit on and which one is the verb of giving out something? Okay, share and chair. So we have this Spanish ear that is unable to see the difference And when you tell the difference to your students, immediately they say, but you're pronouncing the same word, right? Have you ever come through that experience? So you're pronouncing the same word. You're not saying anything different, right? It's like, for example, like with the vowel sounds also, right? So you say, for example, kiss and keys, right? So for people immediately say, oh, you're pronouncing the same word, but it's actually not the same word. Okay, so the ear is mandatory when studying phonetics. Well, alveopalatals, we do have those in Spanish, so there won't be any problems except for the problem in combining or mixing up or confusing these two, alveopalatals with palatals, and saying share instead of chair, or the other way around, or saying, for example, let's say, oh my God, like ja or ja, they make a distinction. They don't make a distinction here, so they confuse these two sounds, alveopalatals and palatals. Why alveopalatals? Because they are made up of two different sounds. The first one is alveolar and the other one is palatal. So t, sh, or d and j. Okay, these two sounds are or make up this alveopalatal thing. Velar sounds, the back of the tongue and the velum are involved. And then the glottal sounds, the glottis is involved. There are two glottal sounds in English. There is one which is the as in house, similar to the jota, the Spanish jota. And there is another one which not everybody, okay? There's another one which not everybody makes in English. The other glottal sound is a complete obstruction that some people, native speakers or learners of the English language, make when pronouncing words like, for example, button. Okay, button. What they make, instead of saying button with a T, they make an obstruction in the glottis, and they say something like button. Okay, button. Important. Okay, they make an obstruction right here. That is the other glottal sound that exists in English. However, since it is not a way of a mandatory pronunciation, it's simply just a dialectical variation, most people don't study it. Okay, I will show you the symbol later. Okay, the manners of articulation. Remember, the air comes from the lungs and then starts the speaking production process right here as soon as it reaches the vocal folds or the vocal cords. From here up, then the sound will start changing into, the air will start changing into sounds. Okay, so based on the obstruction that you make, you will be making either stop sounds. Look at this, stop sounds, nasal stops and oral stops. Okay, why nasal sounds are considered stops? If you pay attention to the pronunciation of the nasal sounds, right? I say why is it considered stop if the air is in fact flowing out without any interruption? Why do you think it is considered a nasal stop?
Because it stops the breathing.
Okay, good try. Maybe. Okay, it's there are oral stops. You know oral stops, right? So pa, ba, ta, for example, right? But nasals are also considered stops. Why? It is easy to pick Why pa and ba are considered stops, right? You're blocking the air. But why nasals? I said all the way, right?
Because when you do the sounds, you stop it from going out from the oral cavity, so it goes through the nasal cavity.
Exactly. Okay, good. Because when you pronounce a nasal sound, you are blocking entirely the air in your mouth. So the oral cavity is mandatory when you make a stop, okay? Either an oral stop or a nasal stop. So the air is indeed flowing out, okay, freely, but not through the oral cavity. In the oral cavity, you are simply making a complete obstruction. So because of that, the nasal sounds are also considered stops. Fricatives, all the sounds that make some type of friction when pronouncing them, like sh, for example, right? You hear the friction. There's some friction. The air is like fighting to struggling to come out. That is because the obstruction is partial. However, the cavity or the path through which the air is coming out is so narrow that it causes some turbulence. It causes some friction. So those sounds are called fricatives. The affricates come from an African word called africaire. Okay, that means to rub or move against. Okay, and that is precisely what happens when you pronounce these sounds. You put your articulator, in this case the tip of the tongue, to pronounce one sound, and then immediately, right after you pronounce that sound, you move the tongue against the hard palate, and then you pronounce another sound. So affricates are a combination of two sounds making one, which is in this case an alveolar sound, which is T, for example, or D, and then a palatal sound, which is sh or j. So when you make when you put them together, you're pronouncing ch and j. J as in jeep, as in judge, okay, as in chair, as in what charming, okay. That is what affricates are or stand for. Sibilant sounds. Well, sibilant sounds are all those sounds that make a hissing noise. Some fricative and affricates are included in the sibilant sounds. So the combination of fricatives and affricates basically make what we call sibilant sounds. Okay. Sonorants and obstruents. Sonorants are sounds that are made without any obstruction of the air. Okay. Whereas obstruents are sounds that are made with partial or complete obstruction of the air. Okay. In this case, sonorants, well, you kind of like hear the sound extend itself as long as you want without any obstruction. I will give you the list of sonorants and obstruents. You will need it for the phonology class. Okay, liquids, lateral and retroflex. By the way, guys, you all know that the R, the English R, is different from the Spanish one. However, we take for granted the difference between the English L and the Spanish L. Okay, and believe it or not, they are different. Let me give you an example, right? When you hear an English native speaker trying to speak Spanish, pay attention to the L. An English speaker would say something like la casa, right? They don't say la casa, they say la casa. The L sounds different, right? Have you ever perceived that difference? The L is different, and the reason why it's different is because the English L is more lateral than the Spanish L. The Spanish L is more frontal. So when you pronounce the Spanish L, you say simply la, 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 right? When you pronounce the English L, the blades or the sides of the tongue comes down, and then the air flows out through the sides of the tongue. So you say la, you say la, okay? It's more like flat in the mouth than the Spanish L. So you need to be careful and also make a distinction or make it clear to your students when you teach when you teach phonetics and when you teach any English course and you want your students to improve pronunciation. Make that distinction, okay? Make them pronounce it the way it should be pronounced. And then the glides, which I already mentioned before with a palatal definition, right? The glides with which involve two different sounds, e and w, which we don't have in Spanish either. So that is a little hard for our students to get accustomed to pronouncing you, yes, instead of you and yes, or would instead of good, right? So be careful with those also. That's also for you and for your students, okay? Bilabial stops, okay? So there are two different bilabial stops depending on the stage of the velum. Then you make a nasal sound or an oral sound, okay? As you can see, in both pictures, the air is completely blocked, by the two lips. So both are bilabial stops, nasals or plosives or, stops, which is the same. Okay, this is the English consonant chart again. Okay, here I'd like to talk about, as you can see in some places, there are two different sounds, okay, making a pair of sounds. This is what we call in English a minimal pair. What is a minimal pair? Do you know the definition of minimal pairs? What is a minimal pair?
Those are like two words that they are written differently, but they sound similar, something like that.
Kind of, yes. There are two definitions of minimal pairs. One is related to words, and the other one is related to sounds. When talking about words, we mean, by minimal pair, we mean those words or two words that are pronounced exactly the same except for one sound. Okay, they have the same number of sounds. Let's say, for example, cat and bat. Okay, they have the same number of sounds. Both words have three different sounds, and the only difference between them occurs in the same position in both words. So bat and cat, the only difference between them is just the first sound. One is B and the other one is K. Okay? So in that sense, they are minimal pairs. If on the other hand I say, for example, cat and cats, and then I simply add a sound, they are not minimal pairs. Why? Because they don't have the same number of sounds, and the difference obviously does not occur in the same position in both words. The other definition is the one that we will take into account today, right? It involves sounds. Remember, every sound has a classification. If it is a consonant sound, then the classification is place of articulation, voicing, place, and manner of articulation. Well, if a minimal pair defines this pair of sounds that are exactly the same, except for one feature. In this case, for example, these two are bilabial sounds. These two are stop sounds. However, the first one is voiceless and the second one is voiced. So they are exactly the same except for one feature, in this case, voicing. However, if I take this B sound and this sound, they are also minimal pairs. Why? Both are bilabial sounds. Both are voiced sound, as you can see. All the nasals are voiced, okay, just like vowels. However, the only difference between them is that one is oral and the second one is nasal. So B and are minimal pairs. Taking that into account, it is not strange now, going back to the example I gave before, it is not strange now that the person from the advertisement named Manuel would pick B to change the sound, as in Baduel, okay, and not the P as in Patuel. It does not make any sense to take the P because the P is more different to M than B. Okay, B is the closest sound to Okay, so unconsciously in your mind, you will try to find the closest sound to the one that you are pronouncing or you are supposed to pronounce. In this case, since the person has a stuffy nose because of the cold, the flu, the person cannot make the sound M. However, that person needs to find another way to say that M, being close enough to actually not change the meaning and being able to understand what he wants to say. So in this case, the closest is B. The same happens to the second consonant or nasal consonant in Manuel, which is the N. As you can see, the person changed the N for D, okay? Because D is the closest one to the N, as you can see. Look, both are alveolar, right? Both are stops, okay? Both are voiced, because remember that the nasals are stopped. But one is nasal and the other one is oral. So they say Baduel instead of Manuel and still sounds correct, okay? Still sounds kind of like similar. If I take Z and then I say Bazuel, does not make any sense because Z is not a stop sound. It's a fricative sound. And then now you're changing all the characteristics. Now you're changing oral for nasal and stop for fricative. And then now the sound is so different that it does not make any sense what you are saying. Okay? Do you have any questions? So Manuel changed into Baduel in that advertisement. Obviously, that advertisement was not made by any phonetician, but it's something logically and something unconscious that happens to all of us human beings in our heads, but it makes sense in phonetics. Okay. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, great. Here are the definitions of minimal pairs. As I said, there are two definitions. One regarding sound differences, and the other one regarding the words differences. So two different sounds pronounced the same except for one phonetic feature. Voicing, manner of articulation, nasality, place of articulation, those things will make a minimal pair if only one is different. And then also two different words which are pronounced exactly the same except for one sound, which occurs in the same position in the two words. Okay, it has to happen in the same position in the two words. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Consonant clusters. This is something you need to be careful about, okay? You need to take into account when teaching phonetics also, okay? Consonant clusters will lead to mispronunciations if the cluster does not exist in your native language. For example, a cluster is simply a group of consonant sounds occurring together in the same syllable. Some people extend that definition and they say just consonant occurring together. It doesn't matter if they're in the same syllable or if they belong to different syllables. Anyways, it's just a bunch of consonant sounds put together. What happens here is that in Spanish, we don't have some clusters that exist in English. For example, SPL, as you can see here, right? For example, say splash. Okay, splash. What happens to Spanish speakers when they see the word splash, spray, Spanish, school? What happens? Who can tell me? What do you expect?
They usually add the vowel E at the beginning of the words.
Okay, great, excellent. They usually add the vowel E at the beginning of the cluster. Do you know why? Anybody can tell me why?
Because we don't have those clusters in Spanish.
Because we don't have those clusters in Spanish. And when we need, in this case, because in our Spanish mind, it is so hard to, internalize that when you say speak, that SP belong to one syllable. And in our Spanish mind, we want that S to belong to another syllable, okay? Like español, okay? The S and the P belong to different syllables. We want the S to belong to another syllable. So in order to make a new syllable, we insert a vowel. This in English, in linguistics, is called vowel epenthesis, okay? Vowel epenthesis. The epenthetic vowel is a vowel that is inserted into a word to make the pronunciation as comfortable as possible or as close to the pronunciation of our native language as possible. Okay, so we take a foreign word and we immediately adjust it to fit into our native language system. Okay, so spray, we say spray, right? Spanish, we say Spanish. Immediately, we try to make two syllables out of one because we don't have that cluster as you said, right? So you're right. That thing, that epenthetic vowel does not only exist in Spanish, okay? In fact, that is something that happens, in different languages. For example, Italian, okay? I don't know if any here speaks Italian or have been to Italy or have talked to any Italian person in English. In Italian, there's no stop sound at the end of a word. Okay, so no T, no D at the end of a word. Okay, not like in Spanish that we say verdad and then we finish, we end the word with a D, even though we pronounce it as T or something. In Italian, there's no stop like voiceless stop sound or voice stop sound at the end. What happens is when they learn English and they have to pronounce the word like bed, for example, right? The place where you sleep, you say bed. They don't pronounce bed because it is hard for them to end the word with a D. So what they make is what they do is they make this epenthetic vowel. They insert a similar. It's similar. It's not a, but it's similar to a at the end of a word. So they, instead of saying bed, they say bed. Okay, bed, because it is easier for them, more comfortable for them to pronounce the word that way. So that is just one of the things that the Italians will do. Italians also, they don't have the jota, the sound at the beginning in any word in Italian. It does not exist. So what they do is simply they pronounce the H in English just like we pronounce the H in Spanish. Mute, totally silent. So they would say something like I'm going home. Instead of I'm going home, they say I'm going home. So that is another important aspect of Italian. But it happens in different languages. Samoan, for example, okay, Samoano, like a native language in some groups in Hawaii. They also emphasize a vowel, right? But in this case, they prefer to use the E sound. So when they have to pronounce Christmas, for example, right? Christmas, they don't say Christmas. In Samoan, Christmas is Christmasi, okay? Because all the clusters in the word Christmas, okay, Christmas in their language, all the clusters must be interrupted by the word the sound E. So kiri, okay, kri is a kiri, sm, sima, okay, kiri simasi. Basically, that's what happens, okay, in Samoan. So it is not only in Spanish, but definitely you need to try to make your students understand that that's not a way to pronounce a cluster, okay? Do you have any questions or any comment about this topic? No? Okay.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Professor, a question. What happened with the W and the U when, I mean, that could be an example or that's something different?
Like,
when we say like, I got a classmate, his name is actually like, in Spanish, we call him Waldo, but my professor used to call him Waldo instead of saying I mean, like making the difference how we say it in English and then the way we say it in Spanish.
okay. Yes, what happens there is basically that there are some names or some words that contain sounds that do not exist in your native language, right? So that if, for example, a person in Panama whose name is William, most people would call him William, right, with G. And the reason is because our W is not present in any word in Spanish, right? Obviously, the W exists in the Spanish alphabet. However, it is not pronounced. It is not produced. In fact, there's no Spanish word with a W in it. Okay, but it exists for some reason in the alphabet. What happens is you need to try to make your students know that, or let's say you need to try to make your students aware of the sounds that do not exist in their language and make them, able to perceive the difference. It's not the same saying William than saying William. It's not the same saying, for example, good than saying would. Okay, which is very challenging to pronounce the W and the U sound together. In this case, the problem would not be a cluster because there is no cluster in Waldo, for example, right? There's no cluster, but the problem would be that the students need to make a sound that they have never made before. Because in Spanish, if they are 18 years, if they are 25 years, in Spanish they have been 25 years not pronouncing W ever. Okay, so they need to start pronouncing the W. Same as the Y, okay, Y sound, the Y, we call it, right, the Y. Y in Spanish, we pronounce it just like a double L, and that is the problem with our spelling. That's why when you say, for example, llave, some people will ask you like, okay, llave with con L, con double L o con Y, right? Because we don't make any distinction between the Y and the J and the AJ or double L, right? Since we don't make any distinction, we have problems in spelling, okay? In Spain, for example, they don't have any problems in writing words or spelling words with Z or S or C because they make a distinction between those sounds. We don't, okay? So we have that disadvantage there. But yes, the problem is not a cluster, but not existing sounds in your native language. Any other questions? No? Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm sure you have been working like this in previous classes. So this was my presentation. I will send you the link for the classroom access to the presentations and the book I uploaded, and then also to the homework for next class. We will take a break, okay? So you can just, I don't know, go eat something or relax, stretch, right? And then maybe, I don't know how you have been working, but maybe at 1, I can send you what I want you guys to do in the afternoon, which is basically like a quiz. It's just like a workshop, but it's like a quiz about all the information we have talked about this morning, okay?